First thing you need to do is go to unity.com. So Unity is a platform for making lots of different things. It was founded by three guys from Copenhagen, and they were making games for the Apple, so the iOS system. But they discovered that the platform they had was actually more valuable than the games they were making, so they made the platform available. So Unity was one of the first companies to get involved in VR and in the development of virtual reality applications. Right from the start with Palmer Luckey, they created tools for making virtual experiences. It's a very complex application, so it has a lot of different uses. So it's used for things like iOS, Android apps, Windows, you've got Linux, PlayStation, PlayStation 5, Xbox, and you can see there's a good few more, even the HoloLens and Magic Leap. Oculus is one of their partners as well, so they are able to create applications for virtual reality. So the first thing you need to do is to get a Unity ID. So go back up to the top of the page and click on the top right, and you've got two options there: create Unity ID and sign in. Now if you already have one, you can sign in, but if you haven't, click on create a Unity ID. So in here you fill out this form. So once you fill out the form, then you'll download the application. Once you've registered with Unity and you have a Unity ID, you'll be asked for what type of license you want. So the personal and the student ones are free. So if you download either of those, you'll be able to start using it straight away. They have a licensing agreement whereby if you're a company or if you make more than 100,000 euros, then you start paying, but you can use it for free most of the time. So just click on download, right, for the Windows, the Mac, or Linux, whichever you're using. Once you've downloaded the Unity Hub, you'll get a screen like this. So mine is in dark mode, yours might be in light mode. As you can see here on the left hand side, I've got some objects here. So this is projects. These are the different projects I've been doing. You got installs. These are the different versions of Unity. Now Unity updates and changes regularly. So what I suggest is, well, pick the latest update. If you see beside it the letters LTS, that means long-term support. So that's one that they intend to keep running for a long time. So that would be a good one to pick. And also, you may have more than one. So you might have a few different versions. But once you're starting a project, pick one and stick with that one till it's over. Otherwise, you might get issues with compatibility. There's also a learn section. So there are a lot of courses on Unity that you can take. There's many virtual reality ones as well, which are very good. Now, one of the reasons developers use Unity a lot is due to the community. So a lot of the engines, like for example, Unreal Engine, that can do virtual reality applications as well, but it's not as popular because Unity has such a good community and it allows you to do quite a lot. And there's a lot of resources like tutorials and forums and assets that you can download. Since you've got a Unity ID, that also gives you access to the Unity Asset Store. And the Asset Store has a lot of models and pieces of code and all kinds of assets that you are able to use and put into your application as well. So to start a project, you go up to installs or project, and just click on new project. You'll see here there are some templates, so 2D, 3D, Now you'll also see that there's a VR template, but what we're going to do is we're going to use the 3D Core one, which is that one for today. So select 3D Core, give it a name over on the right hand side. Give it a location. Now these files do get quite large, so you might need to free up some space on your computer or your laptop. And then click Create Project, and it'll start creating it. When you open Unity, you can see here I'm getting a dialog box just asking if I want to download the new version. I'm going to skip the new version. There's always a new version. You can see here I'm in dark mode. So in the file, our edit and preferences, there's an option under general. So editor theme. So you can have light or dark. I just like the dark light. I like the dark one just because it's a bit easier to look at. It's less straining on the eyes, but whichever you prefer. So that's in the edit menu, go to preferences and click on general. So what I'm going to do now is give a little tour of the interface. So when you see it first, it might look a bit daunting because there seems to be quite a lot going on. What I recommend is think of it as a theater. You're the director in a theater. You've got a stage, you've got lights, you've got the props, you've got the actors, you've got your story, your script, and all of those things. And obviously your audience. These panels can be moved around. So if you click on any of them, you can drag them like that. So you can set it up depending on what you're doing. You can move things around. I recommend just going with the defaults. So if I go up to the window and I go to layouts, I can go to the default layout and it just keeps me here. So to look around the interface then, up in the top you've got your drop down menus. So we'll be looking at all those, where things are. I suppose file, scene, save as, new project, open project, save project. They're all in there. Now down below it you can see a hand. That will move your view around the scene. You've got a move tool, so that's for moving objects, a rotate tool and a scale tool. So they're the ones we'll be using the most. Then underneath that you've got the hierarchy. So this is your stage. So this is everything that's on the stage. So at the moment it's called sample scene. That's what the default scene is called. And you can see the little arrow beside it. If I click on that, I can see what's in my scene. So I've got a camera and I've got a light. Now in the right hand, the next big panel here, in the scene panel, I can see when I click on the camera, there it is. And when I click on the light, there it is as well. If you didn't have a camera or a light, your scene would be jet black, so you wouldn't be able to see anything. So they're the two defaults that it starts with. Now moving down, we've got this project tab. So in there this is like the backstage area of the theater. So it's got all the assets and everything that you're going to be using, the code, the scripts, anything that you're going to use in your project will be down here. So you can see at the moment I've got assets. There's a folder called scenes, right? And in that folder called scenes is my sample scene, which is my default opening one. There's also some default packages that will come up as well. So you can see them there. One of them is TextMesh Pro. That's one we'll be using a lot. You don't need to worry about most of these. So you can hide them and click on the assets. The next tab is called the console. So you'll get to know the console because this is where it tells you any errors that you have, and there are nearly always errors. You can see here when I have one telling me that I have an old version of Visual Studio Editor, which is an app that's used for writing the scripts. But if I press clear, I can get rid of them. Often the error messages in the console won't make any difference. You don't need to do anything with them, and sometimes you may need to maybe delete a file or do some editing, but for the most part You shouldn't have much going on in here. Now up here then, so I've got my scene. Just to move around the scene, if I use the hand, see it's a hand now, I can view it from different areas, dragging around. If I use my wheel and my mouse, I can zoom in and zoom out. And if I do a right hand click, I get this eye, which lets me look around like it was a head. The next tab is called the Game tab. This is the view from the camera. So here's my camera. So when I click Game, that's what my camera can see. So at the default, it's just an empty space with a sky. The next tab is the Asset Store. Now this is moved online. So what you'll be doing is going to the Asset Store, finding the assets you want, and they'll open up in Unity. We'll get to that later. Now on the right hand side then, you've got the inspector. So this window is a very important one, and it's probably the most complicated one. So you can see in here we've got directional light. So that's what the object is. So because I've clicked on the light in the hierarchy, I get the options for the light. So there it is. It's got position, rotation, and scale. So directional light is a bit like the sun. So it's a large light source from far away. So its position doesn't make much difference. The rotation will though, because you can recreate, say, different times of day. So you've got lots of settings here. So we've got the type, so it's directional. The color, you can change the color of the light. The mode, the intensity, so how bright it is, and a whole lot of others. For example, shadows, soft shadows, hard shadows, no shadows. So Unity does provide lots of options all the time, which can make it a bit daunting to look at, but often you don't need to use most of these most of the time. So going back to my scene then, here's my light. Now if I want to rotate it, I could go over to rotation in the inspector, or the other option is up on the toolbar, click on rotate, and you can see I can move the light around. So it's like the sun setting and rising. Next, I'm going to add some objects to my scene. So we're kind of floating in space here with just the camera and the light. So I'm going to make a floor. So if you go up to the Game Object menu and go to 3D Object and select a plane, that's created a floor in my scene. Now it's very bright. I've just got the light and the camera. Can't even see the camera. Okay, so there's my floor space. You can add other objects as well. So there's some simple shapes. So we'll take a look at a few of them. I'm going to move up a little bit. And you go again, Game Object, 3D Object. So we'll start with a cube. You can see I've got a cube here, and it's the circles around it tell me that it's in rotate. That's the tool I've selected. I can also move it by clicking on the hierarchy, up by the hierarchy, the move tool. So I can move it around. You can see its shadow there on the plane. So you can move things around. Remember, I can zoom in with the wheel on my mouse. If I do a right click, I can look around and I can look at it from different angles. Another thing you can do over here is called the gizmo, which is the X, Y, and Z axis. So I can rotate around or above or below. One of the things you need to get used to is you're in a 3D space. So sometimes you might be looking at something and you're not sure, like it looks like a square now because I'm looking down. I have to be by the side, see that it's a cube, and say I want to put it on the floor. Got to get used to moving things around and seeing where they are. So the X is left and right. Y is up and down, and the Z axis is near and far. The other object you have is the scale tool. So I'll click on that one. Now I can scale by clicking on the box in the middle, which will scale it from every direction. Or I could go on one of the axes. So for example, I might want to make a wall. Okay, so to make my wall, I want it to be thin and wide, and I can move it back a bit. Right, and I might rotate it as well, so I'll make a wall along the back here. Okay, so I'll zoom in, I can see my wall. The other objects are game object, 3D object. You can put in a sphere and a capsule and a cylinder. More complicated shapes and models you'll need either to use model making software like Blender. Now to add a bit of color, so we've got these objects here. So if I want to add some color, now you can't just click on something and give it a color, you give it what's called a material. The reason for this is because you may want to use that color again somewhere else. So rather than just clicking on an object and giving it a color, you create a material, which is an extra step and takes a little longer, but it'll save you in the long run, because if you want to use that material again, you'll have it. So to create a material for this ball, I'm just going to go down to my assets and I'm going to do a right click and I go up to create and I go to material. And now it's asking me to give it a name. So I'm going to call it sphere. Highly recommend naming things as you go along, because after a while you might have a lot of different assets and objects on your stage, in your scene, and you're not going to remember the names of them. So give them, that's a good tip, is to give them names. So here's my sphere. Now you'll see in the inspector, because I've selected the sphere, I've got the attributes of the sphere. So I'm going to go with a color here. So I click on the color and I'll go for red color. Now you've got some options with metallic and smoothness, but I'll put this onto the sphere so you can see them. And the way you do it is you just simply click on your material and drag it onto the sphere. So here it is here, and if I move the metallicness, you can see how the light affects the sphere changes, similar with smoothness. So you can go from maybe a more rough ball to a smooth snooker ball. So you get it the way you want it. And this means that once you've created this material, I can put it on anything else. So if I want to put it over here, I can drag it on. And I've got that now for the rest of my project. So it can be useful in that way. So besides a color, you may want to add a texture. So this is my wall. So what I might want to do is make that a brick wall. So in order to do that, there are lots of sites. So if you just Google brick texture, you're going to find lots of sites with them. Now there's one site that I recommend, which is a nice one. This is a website called Ambient CG, and this site has lots of free textures that you can use. So in mine, I want to make my wall a brick wall. So if I go up to materials, there's a whole load of different ones. Actually, see here, one of the first ones is a brick one. So I get my brick wall here, and this is the texture I'm going to add to my Unity project. So all you do is you download it. I'm just going to go with the smallest one. So it'll download it as a zip file, then extract it. So this is the contents of the folder. So when I go back to Unity, I'll drag that folder in. And it's added to my assets here. So you can see here it's called bricks. So I'll open that up. And again, I have to create a texture. So if I do a right click, create material, and I'm going to call it brick. Okay. Now again, I go over to the inspector, and instead of a color, I'm going to put a texture on. So in this case, I want the bricks. So I get the image with the bricks and I drag it up into that box and drop it off. Now the bricks may not necessarily be smooth, or they might want some bumps. So in this case, I've got these things called normal maps, and they're going to create some texture and some bumps on the brick. So just drag it over and click normal map. And I've got my texture. Now if I drag it onto my wall, like I did with the color, I get my brick wall. Now these bricks are very close together, so I can change the tiling. So this image is tiled across the whole wall. So I'm going to change the tiling. So you can see in the inspector for the material, the tiling I can go by increase or decrease. So I'm going to increase it in this case, make the bricks a bit smaller, and you can change the X and Y. So I might make them a little bit bigger. So you need to change those till you get it the way you want it. So there's a wall. So I've added a texture to an object. Next thing I might want to do is take a look at lighting. So I'll get rid of these just to make some room, and I'm going to make the floor a dark color so I can see the light, because it's very bright at the moment. So again, like with the sphere, right click, create material. I'm going to call it floor, and I'm going to pick something dark and drag it on. Okay. So lights. So we've already seen the directional light. Now where that is doesn't make much difference, because it's like the sun. The rotation of it makes a difference, but the location doesn't matter so much. Another type of light is a point light. So if I click on game object, go to light, I can make a point light. So this is like a light bulb. Now you can see a very faint circle around it, which means that it's brightest, like a light bulb, it's brightest in the center and it gets weaker as it moves away. So if I move it near the wall, you can see it shining on the wall. So that's a point light, like a light bulb. And you can change the color, the range, the intensity of the light, and lots of different things. So I'll change the color. So I'm gonna make it a red light, or put it back to white. And you can see it's creating, when I move it, you can see it moving on the floor. If I move it near the ball, okay, you can see it affecting the ball as well. So that's a point light. Now the other type of light we'll be looking at is called a spotlight. So go again, game object, light, spotlight. So you can see this one, it's more of it's directed. So you can see there, like a torch or like a lamp, So I can, if I rotate that onto the wall, you'll be able to see it better. Okay. So I've got my point light. And you can have as many lights as you want. So say if you had a light on the ceiling of a room, right, you might have it like that, or you might use the point light or the directional light. So here's a little challenge for you. Make a table. Do you want to pause the video and make a wooden table and put it in the center here? Pause the video now and I'll show how to do it in a moment. Okay, so if you're making a table, so I'm going to use cubes. So I go to Game Object, 3D Object, and Cube. Right, so I'm going to need 4 legs. So I'll bring this up and I'm going to change the scale of it. So I'm going to make a table leg. And it's a bit under the ground there, so I'm going to move it up a bit. Okay, so there's my 1 leg. Now Unity, you can copy and paste, which is great, right? You'd be using it a lot. So you can either right click or select it and go to edit and duplicate, or just use the keyboard shortcut, which is Control Copy, Control V. Now I have 2 table legs. I need 4, so I'm going to press Shift, select both, Control Copy and paste again, and have my table legs. Next I need a top for my table, so I'm going to use another cube. And this will be the table top. So this is just good practice to get used to moving around and seeing how everything works. So I'm going to move that down and I'm going to look at it from above. So if I go up to the y-axis, I can scale it. So it's looking over my table, okay, and I'm going to tidy it up a little bit. I'm going quickly, but you take your time. So here's a table. I'm going to move this sphere out of the way as well, so I can see it properly. Okay, so see my legs aren't, my tabletop needs to come down a little bit. There. Okay. So now I'm going to give it a texture. So like we did before, I'm going to go to this site ambientcg.com and I'm going to get a wood texture. So here's one here, a nice dark wood. Download. So it's downloaded as a zip file. Again, extract it. And I'm going to drag it into my Unity project. So here's the folder. Right click, create material. I'm going to call it table. And I'm going to drag the wood up into Albedo. And again, this one came with, they don't always come with normal maps. So I'm just going to drag that in. So it's there, and I can drag my wood onto my table now. Again, you can change the tiling as well if you want. Okay, so I've made a wooden table. Now just to note, you'll see now if I go over to my hierarchy, it's getting a bit full now. So here's a good tip as well. What you can do is tidy it up a bit. So if I do a right click, there's an option here, create empty. So that creates an empty object, and I'm going to call it table. And what I'll do is I'll put all my cubes. So I've got 5 cubes here. So I'll select all of them and I drag them into the empty object table. That's tidied it up and it's created one. So now I can just move it all as one piece. And another cool thing I can do now is if I click on assets, if I drag this whole table down into my assets, it turns it into a prefab. Okay, so that's a prefabrication. So now I can have as many tables as I want. Okay, so don't spend a lot of time making things in Unity when you can duplicate and you can use copy and paste a lot. So what I'd like you to do is create just using light, color, and textures, and using the simple shapes, have a go at making a little diorama. So make a little scene there. Okay, so if you use all the things we've used so far, make a scene, just practice and get used to moving things around, looking at things from the different angles and seeing how it all works and putting textures on. And what we'll be doing next week then is, if you get the hang of that, we'll move on to the next step. Now at the moment our camera is a fixed camera, right? So it's a bit like a television camera. But what we'll be able to do is change that, turn it into a first person camera, which means it'll look like you'll be able to walk around and see it from the person's point of view and walk around your scene. Now, one last thing we will do is we'll do something about this sky, because the sky is very plain. So we'll enter a skybox. So the way you do that is using the asset store. So if I go to the asset store, this is Unity's asset store. So it's called assetstore.unity, and I'm signed in. Okay, and I'm going to find Skybox. So this is how you get assets off the store and open them in Unity. Now a lot of these are paid for and the quality is variable. So anybody can put things up here to sell. But if you go down to free assets, if I click on that box there, tick free assets, we'll get them here. And I happen to know this Wispy Sky one is a quite nice one. But there's, again, over the weekend, maybe try out all the different, try out some of these different packages that you can get. So Wispy Sky, and again, it's free. So when you find the package you want, you click on it, you get some more details about it. So here it is here, and it says open in Unity. So I click on that, and it goes open Unity editor. And what it's doing is it's importing it into my project. Okay, so here it is here, Wispy Sky. So I click download. So it'll download the package. This one's a kind of a small one, so it's quite quick. And then it'll ask me to import it. So it's going to show me all the different skies that they have. Now sometimes you might download a package and you don't want the full package, you just want part of it. So you can do that as well. I'm going to click import. I'm going to bring all of them in. So here's all the different skies. All right. So you can tick. So maybe you don't want them all. I'll take them all because it's quite small. But some of the packages come out quite big, and maybe you only want part of it. So there it is there. Click import. And that's how you get an asset from the asset store into your scene. All right, now over on the right hand side now you'll see I've got Wispy Sky. So this is the asset I've just downloaded, and I'm going to go in and I'm going to find the sky that I want. Now, I think it's in materials, right? And here's the different skies, and I can drag it in. Okay, so it makes a big difference having a nice sky, and you can get different times of the day. Okay, so that's the skybox. So I think that's enough to get started. Once you're finished, then as well, you want to go File and Save. So save your scene. So like I said, have fun, make a little diorama, just make whatever you want, and we'll continue on next week.